Welcome, birders. This is Ed Pullen, your host on the Bird Banter Podcast, where birders talk birding. I should be home and well recovered from a month-long trip to the tropics, but not happening this year with COVID-19. So, got me to thinking a little bit about the tropics. What's special about them, birding the tropics, that sort of thing, especially because my daughter and my son are both in Costa Rica right now. Costa Rica is basically locked down. You can't really fly into Costa Rica at all. And I had intended to visit them there last month, do some birding there, and then go on to Peru for a period of time. I had a bird guide set up for a few days there. I was going to be doing a Rotary Friendship Exchange. That all got called off and got me to thinking about Costa Rica, especially because I still am hoping to go visit my children there sometime soon. The tropics are just a different area when it comes to birding. Birding the tropics is not easy. I haven't birded the tropics a whole lot, and it got me thinking, well, what are the tropics? I remember learning about the tropics somewhere in school. Well, it turns out the tropics are defined as the areas on Earth where at some point during the year the sun is directly overhead. So that turns out to be about 23.27 degrees north, the Tropic of Cancer, and 27.23 degrees south, the Tropic of Capricorn. So in between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn is the area called the tropics. Now, you think of the tropics as being just hot and jungles. At least that's what I think of I used to think of the tropics as. But turns out the tropics are not all the same. Not by a long shot. There are deserts in the tropics. There are jungles in the tropics. There are big mountains in the tropics. There are big cities, and there are very rural areas, a lot like anywhere else in the world. But one thing about the tropics in general is that the days tend to be, because they're not as far from the equator, the days tend to be similar in length all through the year. You don't have the 20-hour days and the 6-hour nights, or the 18-hour nights and 6-hour days, or whatever that you might get much farther from the equator. I grew up in Maine and now live in Washington State, so both areas are fairly well up into the temperate zone, and we have long winter nights and long summer days here, whereas in the tropics the days and nights are relatively similar length all through the year. Costa Rica is a really cool country. I think one way to think about what makes Costa Rica cool, well, their national bird is a clay-colored thrush. That's a bird that we get here in the ABA area in the lower Rio Grande Valley, where it just barely comes up that far in its northernmost part of its range. But it's a cool bird. It's robin-sized. It's in the Turdus genus, like our American robin. Is shaped about like the American robin, but it's just sort of drab brown overall. Doesn't have a lot of coloration. And although they're seen frequently in lots of places in Costa Rica, they're just not a bird that is that memorable. They have macaws. They have colorful tanagers and all sorts of spectacular birds. But they named their national bird the clay-colored thrush. And I asked, why would that be? And they said, well, it's because it's a very gentle bird and it has a beautiful song. Well, it is gentle and it does have a beautiful song. But naming your national bird a bird because it's gentle and has a beautiful song, I think speaks a lot to the mentality and attitude of the people there. It's a beautiful country. In terms of size, it's about half the size of the state of Maine, where I grew up. And it's about a quarter the size the state of Washington, where I live now. So it's a fairly small country, and it's moderately populous. It's not a place nobody's at. There's some cool bird facts about Costa Rica. It has 898 species on its eBird list, and the top eBirder is Jim Zook with 860 species. And there are 4 eBird hotspots in Costa Rica with over 500 species on the hotspot list. So there are places you can go with tremendous bird diversity. COVID-19 has been a big issue in Costa Rica. As of May 27th, there have been only 10 deaths and 984 cases, but they closed the border down early on. So it's been really well contained, and from a standpoint of preventing the disease from becoming terribly devastating from a illness standpoint,
I've
they've
only
done a
been
great
there
job
once.
of that. I wish I'd been there more. My daughter's been living there for about 3 years. The first year, I couldn't really visit much. My wife was sick. But after she passed, I got down to visit in 2018. I went in August, and it was hot. My daughter's living on the Caribbean, way down near Panama in Puerto Nueva. And it's a really cool place, but it was hot. It was blistering hot. And so I did a lot of birding from the porch on her Jamaican-style home, where they had a nice, a lot of plantings in the backyard, and I got to see a fair number of birds right from there. I get up early in the morning and walk around the area. It really wasn't a birding trip. I was a visiting my daughter trip. But I'd get out in the morning and bird around, and I remember one of the birds I saw there was Passerini's tanager, just a really cool tanager. Has a scarlet red rump and is jet black, the males. And like tanagers in molt, especially the first year males that I got to see, are this bizarre red and green and black, all mottled sort of color in their molt. So it's really cool. Well, it was cool to see. I went over my bird list here recently, and Passerini's tanager wasn't anywhere on the list. I said, what happened? Well, this scarlet rump tanager on the list now. Well, they've made a lump. Turns out Cherie's tanager and Passerini's tanager have been lumped into the same species, scarlet rump tanager, apparently because they had been split earlier and now they're lumped again. It has something to do with a new study where the males of both species respond equally well to the calls and songs of each subspecies. So turns out they're one species. Didn't cost me a tick on my life list because I'd never seen the other subspecies. But lumps and splits affect birders everywhere, including the tropics. I remember a couple of stories about birding in the tropics. One of the places I wanted to go while I was in Costa Rica was to the Kikoldi Hawkwatch site. I was there in August, so not a time where in that part of the world hawk migration is in full swing by any means. Now, if I'd been at Cape May, August might have been a good time for hawk migration, but that far south, it's more October, November, that the big numbers of hawks that come through, maybe late September, but much considerably later in the year. The eastern U.S., eastern aspect of North American breeding hawks migrate largely to far south of here, a lot of them to South America. So they tend to have certain routes that they take, and there are places where the birds are congregated in huge numbers. They sometimes are where there are thermals off cliffs or mountain ranges. They're sometimes along coastlines. Well, in Costa Rica, on the east coast of Costa Rica, there are both of those things. The coastal range is very close to the coast in southern Costa Rica. So it's about a 3-mile patch of land before it gets very steep up into the Talamanca range. And the hawks are really funneled through that area. So the Hawkwatch platform there sees more hawks than any other single Hawkwatch platform in North America. It's not as many as Veracruz, but in Veracruz they add up several count locations to be the Veracruz count. This, for single platform watch, has over 2 million hawks go by every year. Pretty crazy place. And I thought, boy, that would be really fun to go to, even if it's not during the hawk watching season. I'll just go check it out. Well, the Kikoldi tribe, it's on tribal property, and you're supposed to call ahead to make reservations. Well, I called ahead, and they said, oh, it's not the peak season. You don't need a reservation. Just come on in. You can do it. And we get there, and there's been terrible rains over the month before I came. Tremendous amounts of rain. And a mudslide had washed out the usual path to the Hawkwatch platform. So that was kind of a drag. But there was another path around. We had been told, and we thought, well, we can do that. But it was several miles long, and turned out it was really steep and really slippery and really thick brush. They had to whack your way through it places, and it was quite a challenge. Well, I was just getting going on getting to this, and I'd already fallen several times and covered with mud. Just must have looked like an abomination. And this old native Kikoldi tribal member. I mean, he had to be 80 at least. Comes spryly, comes up to us, and he doesn't speak English, just his native language, and we don't speak his language, of course. But he makes it clear to me that I really should have a walking stick. So out comes a machete and whack, 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 whack. Pretty soon there's a beautiful walking stick made for me. And so I used that the rest of the day, and it probably prevented half of the rest of the falls I had that day. I was pretty much a muddy mess by the time I got back to the car. We never made it to the Hawk Watch station. It just was inaccessible with the knowledge we had of the trail and the energy we had to get up there. It just didn't happen. But it was a really memorable day and had a lot of fun. So I'm hoping to get back to the Kikoldi Hawk Watch sometime during Hawk Watch season when the trail has been better established and can get up there and see a fabulous hawk watch when I visit Costa Rica sometime in the fall. I also got on a couple of other little birding trips with Jean and had a good time there. Tropical birding for me is a challenge because the birds are just tough to see. They're way up high, the light's tough. It's just hard to see birds in the tropics for me. But I'm hoping to find a guide down there and spend more time, learn some of the birds myself, and get a little bit more proficient. Every year, eBird has a global big day where what they do is they collate the checklists on a specific day, usually a Saturday in early May, for every country, and find and list the countries in order of the most species seen in that country on that day that are submitted to eBird as checklists. Well, as usual, Colombia came through as a number one country. It had 1,445 species with 7,221 lists this year. So a lot of species with a modest effort in terms of eBird checklists submitted. For comparison, the United States came in fifth. It had 712 species on 68,689 checklists. So about half the species on about a tenth the number of checklists. So it had about Colombia had about twice as many species but the U.S. had 10 times as many lists. So that speaks a little to the species diversity of the tropics. Peru was second with 1,132 species. Costa Rica was seventh. eBird use is much more prevalent in the Western Hemisphere. So Kenya came in first place of non-Western Hemisphere countries with 613 species, but that was on only 85 checklists. So there's just not the eBird coverage in other parts of the world that there are in the Americas. But still, cool stuff that just speaks to the species diversity of the tropics with birds, but with everything, plants and mammals and reptiles and every insects, every species, tremendous diversity in the tropics. And I bring that up in part because my guest today on the Bird Banter Podcast is my daughter, Jean. She's not really a birder. She grew up in a birding family, so she has a little bit of a clue, but not really a birder. But I wanted to talk to her about a movement that's happening in the tropics that, if it becomes more and more successful, will impact birding. It's called agriforestry or permaculture agriculture, and food forests is another term for it. But it's basically a way to generate tremendous amounts of edible food in a more natural sort of setting, where instead of doing monoculture crop farming, where you just strip the land, plant your crop, grow a whole bunch of it, invite a whole bunch of pests because there's a single crop there, so use a lot of pesticides to control the pests, and largely destroy the habitat for everything except the crop that you're growing. You can use pieces of land and have a tiered crop system with a lot of diverse species diversity in your crop, and make it a very hospitable place for other creatures than humans and the crop you're intending to grow. So Jean and I talk a bit about that. It's really a cool concept, and I'm hoping it catches on and becomes more and more popular. So without further introduction, welcome to the Bird Banter Podcast, episode number 62, my daughter, Jean Pullen. Hey, Jean, welcome to the Bird Banter Podcast.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation on.
Yeah, I had my son on a few episodes ago, Brett, and now I get my daughter. My daughter living the life. Uh, a little introduction. My daughter grew up with me. We lived in Puyallup, Washington, and she was nothing average about Jean, but in a lot of ways, a standard issue American young girl. She was into all the things young girls are, sports and a little bit of nature and all sorts of other cool stuff, and went the fast route through college and into business life. But now things are different. I've got an environmentalist in my family. What's up, Jean?
Yep. Yeah. So now I'm in Costa Rica. I am becoming food sovereign, especially in this time now. I really believe that we must grow some of our own food in our own backyards. We must convert our lawns to gardens, edible gardens, that soil is our common ground, and we all collectively need to do the work and plant the trees to feed our growing world.
Well, you've been walking that walk for sure. I visited you in Costa Rica a little over, not 2 years ago. I should have been back by now, but this virus got in the way. But anyway, you have a place in the Caribbean, way down south near Panama. And when I was there, it was just being converted from a lawn in front and behind the property that the building. And tell us what's happened in a little over a year, Jean. I saw pictures. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, so we purchased 500 square meters, which is not very much land at all. And it was a lawn, and it had already some beautiful trees, like existing coconuts overhead, avocado tree. And that was what attracted us to the land, is just already there was some existing fruit trees, but majority of it was grass. And that's the majority of all of the homes across the world is lawns. Why do we have lawns when you can be growing some of your own greens? We should at least be growing our salads and some of our food in our backyards. So we started out asking all our neighbors for all of their compost, all the leaves they were raking up, all the logs that they were trimming. We asked for all of that material.
If it was organic, you wanted it.
Yes. So we had a big pile going in our yard for probably a year. And then we started crafting this pile into creating beds and raised beds, kind of like horticulture sort of beds, where we would layer different materials, starting with the logs or the harder material at the bottom, creating a lasagna of materials, and then putting a layer of sand, a layer of soil from within the forest, and then a layer of leaves to create a really nice environment of mixing cultures, of beautiful nutrient life that the plants can thrive in, mimicking that of what's already in the forest.
So and by doing that, you turn a 2-foot wide patch into a 5-foot surface area of humped up land that you can grow off all corners of. So you exponentially, or not, you significantly increase the surface area from which you can grow things.
Yeah, and bringing in a lot of bird life. Now, if you come back and survey the birds in the land, there are probably 4 different varieties of hummingbirds coming in and enjoying the beautiful birds of paradise flower collection that we have, and other flowers that they enjoy as well.
Yeah, when I was there, the birds were spectacular already, I have to say. I had there were tanagers and seed eaters and toucans and macaws. You saw the green macaws. Yeah, pretty cool.
The green macaws are by far our favorite. My partner Alan has this dream of like, he's called in macaws going like, like calling them in with banano. And so sometimes he tries to do that, and it's funny, and yeah, it's fun.
Pretty cool. And so now you're spending a part of your year at this place in the Caribbean, but you acquired a larger property in the mountains southwest of San Jose, haven't you?
Yeah. So we found a hectare of land up in the mountains of Costa Rica, near to the Pacific side of Costa Rica. And it was an old cow pasture that was converted 5 years ago into starting to plant trees there. And we acquired this cow pasture that has been worked on a little bit. There's already a few existing fruit trees there, but much more room to grow, and 3 rivers flowing through. So the most important for us is water, fresh water, and room to grow.
So you've got those. Yeah. And you just made a major trip to the Caribbean to your nursery there. You had a whole bunch of seedlings and other things started and brought them back. And what did you plant? Several hundred plants, didn't you? Trees and plants.
Yeah, in the past month, since the middle of April to now, we've probably planted over 500 edible trees and shrubs. So edible perennials, which include something like katuk and chaya and moringa, all edible leaves. And then we've planted really exotic fruit trees and your typical like mangoes. So like the exotics being durian. We've planted 2 durians, 5 breadfruits, jackfruits, mangoes, many avocados, many different varieties of bananas. In a year, we should be able to eat all of our roots and our greens from the land. And in 5 years, we'll have a massively fruiting, diverse landscape from grass to food forest.
Yes, a lot of the people listening will have heard of shade-grown coffee. North Americans are encouraged to drink shade-grown coffee because shade-grown coffee has to have an overstory of larger trees, and for birds especially, that's a fabulous place to live. But your concept, it is like that on steroids. Some people call it a food forest or agriforestry. There are a lot of words for the type of agriculture that you're doing. But describe how that is, Jean, and how that is such a spectacular place for wildlife.
Yeah. Well, I think what gives me so much fire and what got me into this environmentalism is just seeing all the monocrops that exist on this earth and all the devastation from animal agriculture. It's wiped out and extinct many species, and it's really gone quite it's quite sad to think about all the devastation of deforestation due to our own food supply. And now we're seeing how broken that is. And so that's what's kind of created this fire in me, along with seeing how then with a monocrop, there's no diversity. So then chemicals are sprayed on the earth, which are consumed by the people, which then create this domino effect of unhealthy people and unhealthy planet. So what's the solution? Soil. Soil is our common ground. Soil is what feeds our food. And so when we think about an agroforest system or a food forest, it is just mimicking what is in nature. So if you look at a forest, you see there's shrubs, there's ground cover, there's mid-story trees, and then there's a canopy of trees above you. And that's how you can think about an agroforest system. In the tropics, my favorite agroforest system is that of cacao, or, what chocolate's made of, bananas, breadfruit, and taro, and turmeric, and ginger, and vanilla vine growing up a tree. So you can kind of think of such diversity of life and microorganisms that mimic that of the forest, so that animal life, birds can be eating, monkeys can be eating, humans can be enjoying. So it's kind of creating this earth and this food system into something of harmony, of being connected, all being connected to this earth and to this one live organism.
So Jean, you've also been involved in yoga and involved in, surfing and yoga and all sorts of physical activities there. And I know you do a lot of hiking. Have you found parts of your property that are especially birdie that I would say, oh my gosh, I've got to go there every day?
Well, just sitting out on the deck, we see toucans just going from one side. So we have a river on either, we're kind of on a hill, which then it's a grass hill. And then on either side, we're in a biocorridor protecting some of the rivers that are going through the land. So on these biocorridors, there's endemic trees that the birds and animals are living in. And we see a toucan just fly from one side to the other. We see turkey, these big turkey birds that fly from one side to the other. We see aracaris like flying. It's just beautiful to see that. Just sitting on the back deck, we can see just so many birds.
Wow, that's something. So it sounds to me like enjoying coconut and mango water on the back deck and sit in the shade would be a great place to go birding.
Yeah. You don't need to go very far.
A little bit different subject. How is COVID-19 pandemic affecting Costa Rica? I know they've closed the borders, so I can't visit you. How has it affected just life there in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the borders were closed the middle of March, and during that week, the following was Easter week along with Holy Week. And that was the strictest kind of restriction week where everyone was mandated to stay inside and not congregate. And that, I think that the whole country did a very good job of reacting to COVID-19 almost immediately, closing the borders and warning the population to be safe and stay in. And up until probably the last few weeks, the country has continued to operate, markets being mostly open, grocery stores being open, but all of the national parks were closed, the beaches were closed. Granted, in many parts of the country, you can still access beaches and parks. For us personally, we've been so focused on planting trees and regenerating the land that we've been in our own world in isolation and working really harder than ever to create this food sovereignty. But with COVID-19 now, everything is kind of opening back up. People are starting to gather more, and there's only 1,000 cases in the whole
all of Costa Rica.
All of Costa Rica. So people are just being careful and eating healthy, taking their turmeric and ginger tea, and living life now as more normally.
Pura vida now, see?
Pura vida.
Pura
It's
vida.
always pura vida in
Pura
Costa
vida,
Rica.
See. Yeah, very nice. So, Jean, what do you see going forward for your property in the West? Do you see that just becoming a full-fledged, almost all of it, food forest, or do you what's up?
Yeah, so the fruits will start fruiting in 5 years or so, or 4 years. So I think that we will have an abundance of fruit and be able to sell and bring this fruit to market in later years. But in the meantime, we will enjoy the edible perennials and other plants that are sooner to grow and produce, such as we've planted yucca, for example, like 200 yuccas in the past few months.
Wow.
So in a year from now, we'll have so much yucca and plantains, for example, as well. So I see it just being a very abundant, fruiting food forest, living within this garden, interacting with this garden every day, picking fruits, eating from the land, and sharing as well with our neighbors. I see this as a model that can be replicated throughout the tropics, throughout our neighborhood, but it starts with our core, which is our own food supply and our own backyard, and then that ripple goes outwards to our neighbors and outward.
So you've been working with Jungle Project. That's a big part of that educational outreach arm of that company is really working on that same sort of thing, aren't they?
Yeah, Jungle Project is a project. It's a social enterprise all about trees, training, and trade. So there's two parts of the project. One is the social justice and kind of nonprofit arm, and the other is a for-profit arm and is the market or the trade, which so we will be able to have a market for the farmers that are producing food. And it's primarily a breadfruit agriforest system. So breadfruit, have you heard of breadfruit? Do you know what breadfruit is?
I have heard of breadfruit. My daughter told me about it.
Oh my gosh. Breadfruit is a tree that can feed. It is a miracle tree. It's really a tree that can help with our hungry world, help with regenerating it, and help with feeding it. And what's so cool about breadfruit is one tree can produce up to 400 pounds of breadfruit a year. And each fruit is just beautiful and big and green. It's kind of like a potato that grows on trees, but it has more nutritional value and it's more nutritionally dense than other carbohydrates. And it's very low on the glycemic index as well. So it's great for people with diabetes or high blood pressure. Yeah.
So very cool. Those of you who are not familiar, glycemic index is the propensity for a food to increase your blood sugar when you eat it. A lot of simple carbohydrates. You eat a slice of white bread, that's extremely high on the glycemic index. Whole wheat bread might be less so. Some fruits are less so because they have more fiber and are more complex. It takes longer for the gut to break them down into the simple building blocks. So sounds like a great fruit, a great product, and I'm hoping your company goes. The company you have worked with, not your company, the company you've worked with does great. I'm hoping that really pays dividends for the whole world as an ecosystem. That'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's many ways to support the project and support this regenerative movement, and it starts with your own bite.
Exactly.
Everyone starts with our own consumption and choosing where it comes from and choosing what we consume and knowing where it goes, where the waste goes. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, Jean, I know you wanted to keep this short. Thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it. This is going to be great. And I cannot wait to visit. See my girl again.
I can't wait too. It's going to be fun. And thank you for having me on this podcast. And I know that we're going to find many more birds together.
We are. I can't wait to teach myself, and then teach you about all the birds on your property, and then the places nearby, and then the rest of the country, and then the rest of Middle America. Sounds great to me. Sounds great to me. As soon as I can travel, I'm headed your way. You take care, Jean. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Well, that wraps up the Bird Banter Podcast, episode number 62 with Jean Pullen. Thanks for listening. We talked a lot today about restorative agriculture, projects, especially in the tropics, that improve habitat and have a lot of other benefits. Our neotropic migrants who winter there need better habitat to improve their chances of surviving the winter, coming back to breed again here. That's a major issue for many birds in North America who winter farther south. That's also a major issue for, obviously, people, farmers, and other animals, creatures that live down there. So I hope you want to learn about that. You can go to a website called kisstheground.com and learn lots more through their podcasts, their videos, and their written material. I'll also write a blog post on birdbanter.com that talks more about that and other issues we talked about today. So thanks again for listening. And until next time, good birding, good day.